Live on Sky News Australia, The Rita Panahi Show.
Welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, the Voice may have been comprehensively defeated, but Labor governments across the country are pushing ahead with their divisive racial agenda. I'll have some examples of that shortly. I'll be speaking to Douglas Murray about the bizarre alliance between Islamists and the modern left. And talking about the left, I have some startling examples of lefties losing it coming up later in the program. And a very special guest tonight, the very sound, very conservative Hungarian president joins me to explain why her country will not compromise on their tough border protection policies, regardless of EU pressure, and why they are determined to control Hungary's demographic makeup.
We have a quite challenging demographic situation, as most of the welfare countries or the well-developed Western type of countries. And we don't want to tackle this demographic issue by putting the emphasis on immigration. We'd rather emphasize the importance of childbearing and family support.
But before I dive into the day's big stories with Michael Kroger, including rowdy protesters turning up to the Prime Minister's office today, I want to start with buyer's remorse, and that's afflicting an increasing number of teals voters. You remember the teals, the affluent middle-aged women who are essentially leftists who fall somewhere between Labor and the nutty excesses of the Greens in the political spectrum, but they pretend that they're independent centrists. Now, those affluent inner city seats that are increasingly leaning left and fell for the teals are seeing that elections have consequences. Imagine going from a Josh Frydenberg to a Monique Ryan, and I'll come back to Monique in just a second, but you'll recall two of the teals, North Sydney MP Kylie Tink and Mackellar MP Sophie Scamps, disgracing themselves when they backed Greens leader Adam Bandt's attempt to condemn Israel and accuse it of committing war crimes and pushing to amend a bipartisan motion. They wanted to remove a part of the statement that declared Australia stands with Israel and recognises its inherent right to defend itself. Now it's Monique Ryan's turn to disappoint her electorate. The Australian reports that Jewish leaders have attacked the Kooyong MP, accusing her of unacceptable bias. In a letter, the principal of B. Alec College, Jeremy Stowe-Lindner, said Miss Ryan had repeatedly played down the suffering of Israel and of the Australian Jewish community. This comes after Monique Ryan wrote, "As a paediatrician, I find the human suffering in Gaza intolerable," and called for a humanitarian pause so that aid can reach people. Now, Ms. Ryan has rejected the accusation of bias, but there are many in the Jewish community in Kooyong who are unhappy with the first-term MP. The letter from Stowe-Lindner to Ryan states, "Your reference to the suffering only in Gaza is unacceptable, perhaps a reference to the intolerable suffering of the families of 1,400 Israeli civilians on October 7 who were murdered, raped, beheaded would be appropriate too." I'll speak to Michael Kroger shortly about this issue, but before I do, this week we again saw Jews being attacked and intimidated, particularly on university campuses, which have become hotbeds of hatred and intolerance, the rotten fruit of the left's long march through the institutions. But as Jewish students are being monstered and Jews are feeling compelled to hide signs of their Jewishness, and as enraged crowds march in the streets chanting anti-Semitic slogans, well, the Islamists and their useful idiots in the West are banging on about Islamophobia. Every dangerously stupid politician, from Sadiq Khan in London to Kamala Harris in the White House, is talking about the evils of Islamophobia, even as the victims of extremist Islamism are seeing an enormous surge in attacks. Let's hear from the US Vice President.
And so today, I am proud to announce the Biden-Harris administration will develop our nation's first national strategy to counter Islamophobia. This strategy will be a comprehensive and detailed plan to protect Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim.
Now, according to the latest data, anti-Semitism in the US is reaching historic levels in the wake of violence in Israel and Gaza. That's according to the FBI Director, Christopher Wray. Speaking to a Senate panel this week, Mr. Wray said 60% of all religious-based hate crimes targeted Jewish people. That's despite the fact that Jews make up only around 2% of the US population. So naturally, the Biden White House is focusing on Islamophobia. Here to go over the top stories of the day is former President of the Victorian Liberal Party, Michael Kroger. Michael, let's start with the pro-Palestinian rally. They gathered outside Anthony Albanese's office this afternoon, accusing the Prime Minister of supporting genocide, and they also accused the US of killing children.
Albanese, you can't hide. You're supporting genocide. Albanese, you can't hide. You're supporting genocide. When I say Albo, you say blood on your hands. Albo. Blood on your hands. Albo. Blood on your hands. Israel, USA. How many kids have you killed today? Israel, USA. How many kids have you killed today?
Michael, no one seems to be particularly happy with Anthony Albanese's handling of this. Not the pro-Palestinian supporters. I know there's people within the Jewish community who are not terribly happy. Reportedly, Benjamin Netanyahu isn't taking his calls. How do you see his handling of...
Well, they did speak in the end. Look...
they have spoken?
They have spoken.
Excellent.
He's not Bob Hawke. Let's just say that in relation to Israel. He's not really a believer. We've seen the videos of his... younger Albanese views of things, but
you say younger. He was an adult.
Well, he's an adult. Yeah. But look,
teenager.
He's a socialist left leader of the Labor Party, and as a socialist left leader, we're thankful for small mercies. What I object to, by the way, are these rallies where there's just a neo-Nazi element to these rallies. With these people with their signs, from the river to the sea, which is, as we know, calling for the destruction of Israel, the massacre of Jews. So you see most of these rallies, you see these signs there, the Palestinian flag, which is the flag of the Palestinian Liberation Organisation, which a terrorist organisation. So these extremists who are there complaining about Israel and America and Australia, goodness me, they're at the wrong office. They should be at the office of the Greens, those clowns.
Well, not quite greens, but another shade of green, teals. So the teals MPs have disgraced themselves. We had the two who sided with Adam Bant, and now we've got Monique Ryan, the Kooyong teal, who seems to be really upsetting members of the Jewish community in Kooyong. How do you see her handling of this? She's emphasising that she doesn't have a bias, she just cares about the outcome for children.
Well, Mr Stolinda, the headmaster of Bialik College, was, I'm afraid to say to Monique, he was 100% correct. He was absolutely correct. Her initial statement talking about the suffering in Gaza, how incredibly naive, talking about how it would be harder to have a two-state solution with Hamas now. Well, let me tell you, Monique, there will never be a two-state solution with Hamas and Israel. It's dead. Don't even think about, being harder. It's finished. You cannot have a solution with someone who's on your border who wants to kill you. So, and then just to talk about the suffering in Gaza, if you're writing a statement about the suffering in Gaza, it should be prefaced by saying that all of the suffering in Gaza is being caused because Hamas use individual men and women and children as human shields, and because of that, there are deaths in refugee camps, in hospitals, side hospitals, in apartment blocks. Why? Because Hamas, these cowards, are hiding there. And of course, they put such low value on life. They don't really care if these kids or these people are killed. The more that are killed, the better for Hamas. the better for Hamas.
Well, absolutely. They do use them as human shields.
Yeah,
There's a reason why they put their headquarters, including storing their arms, under a hospital.
Correct.
You only do that if you want to maximise casualties.
Yeah, and by the way, it was pointed out to me by someone during the week that the Hamas playbook is straight out of the Nazi playbook. Because in World War II, when the Allies were bombing German cities, the Nazis would come out and say, they're bombing civilian targets. And the second thing they did was always deliberately tell their local officials, exaggerate the number of deaths in order to get the sleepy Western press to say, isn't all that terrible what the Allies are doing to German cities. What Hamas are doing, I wouldn't believe a word Hamas says about their deaths.
Look, I'm sure there are.
They're not in the truth business.
There.
They're not in the truth business.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't trust Hamas's figures, but I'm sure there are innocent men, women and children who are dying.
No doubt.
But like you said, that's due to Hamas. Now, the New South Wales government is advertising for a $250,000 a year executive director for truth and healing to help develop and lead an overreaching healing framework and implement existing healing initiatives across Aboriginal Affairs New South Wales. But Michael, don't get any ideas about applying, because this is an Aboriginal-only position with Aboriginality an essential requirement of the role. Is that fair enough? And do we need to have taxpayers funded executive director for truth and healing?
Well, I think if we're going to have someone, it's probably better that they're of Aboriginal background. But the big question is, do we need one, as you said? And the answer is no. I think Jacinta Price is absolutely right in this stuff. I mean, we need to move forward to try and help those kids, men and women, who are suffering right now, today, tonight, tomorrow. Not continue with the grievance industry that will never close down. This grievance industry will go forever because it needs to perpetuate. So we need to keep talking about grievance and what happened 200 years ago. No, Price is right. It's about working out how we can go forward, not having another 10-year debate about what happened 200 years ago when none of us were alive.
That's it, absolutely. Now, we touched on this last night. Sophie Ellsworth wrote in The Australian about the ABC. Their management, they're concerned that they're not sufficiently diverse. They've urged staff to take action to ensure they reflect modern Australia in our content and staff. This is from the Chief Content Officer, Chris Oliver Taylor. He told staff in an email, the reality is we don't have enough colleagues that come from a diverse background joining the ABC, and we need to deliberately make that happen. He doesn't look terribly diverse himself, I've got to say, but... As always with the ABC, the only diversity that they don't care about, in fact...
Opinion.
Diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, that seems to be banned on the ABC.
I read this story and I thought this is some kind of joke. I mean, David, what's his name, who's running the ABC, or allegedly, I mean, I thought he was pulling our leg. We need diversity at the ABC. No, David, we need diversity of opinion, mate. We need some views other than the Green Left on the ABC, as compares, as panellists, etc. If you want diversity, mate, he should have a good look at Q&A, where there is diversity on Q&A. You go from the hard left to the extremely hard left, and even figures of the Labor right are sort of, booed when they come on. So, David Anderson, for goodness sake, mate, you're making a complete fool of yourself. You're embarrassing the national organisation. And to talk about diversity without diversity of opinion is ridiculous.
Well, how can we have this massive media monster? We're talking about more than $1 billion of taxpayer funds going in every single year. And it has a charter. It has, unlike the private media organisations, I forgot how to speak there temporarily, it has a charter it has to fulfil, and it seems to completely ignore that.
Just ignore it.
I mean, can you, off the top of your head, name me just 3 Conservative hosts on their main station?
Yeah, Tom Switzer's on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Radio Nationals, I think.
On radio? No, I'm talking about ABC TV.
Oh, ABC TV? No, of course not.
No? ABC Radio?
ABC Radio, no.
The main... No.
No.
They've got hundreds Where are the Conservatives? The ABC, where are your Conservatives?
Part of the problem,
you want diversity of opinion.
Rita, we've been in government many years and done nothing about it. And when I was on the ABC, we made a lot of appointments to people who also didn't want to do anything about it. So the coalition's really we've only got ourselves to blame for this ongoing mess at the national broadcaster.
It is an ongoing mess, and I've got to say the coalition just seem too gutless to tackle it. They are worried about the backlash, and the ABC just seems to become more and more activist every single year. Michael Kroger, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me tonight. Now, as we do every week, it's time to speak to the author of international bestsellers, groundbreaking works including The War on the West, The Strange Death of Europe, and The Madness of Crowds. Douglas Murray, let's start in your homeland. We've seen mass marches of more than 100,000 in support of the Palestinian cause in London. But there is a disturbing development. Pro-Palestinian, or should that be anti-Israeli demonstrators, intend to hold a 1 million man march on November 11. Douglas, that's Remembrance Day.
Yes, that's right, Rita. It's Remembrance Day in the United Kingdom, where we remember the dead of the two world wars and commemorate their sacrifice, including, of course, the sacrifice of soldiers from the Commonwealth and around the world in defeating Nazism and Nazi fascism. And in my view, this is a deliberate provocation of the British people, and it should not be allowed to go ahead. Or, and let me put it this way, either it goes ahead, either it doesn't go ahead, or it goes ahead and it will have to be countered, because I don't think the British public should have to put up with this. We should not have to put up with our national monuments being defiled. We should not have to put up with the cenotaph being defiled. We should not have to put up with people marching through our streets calling for the new Nazism, the latest iteration of Nazism, flying their new Nazi flags, rejoicing in the latest murder of Jews. We shouldn't put up with it. And my suspicion, and I think this is already welling up, is that the British public are going to start thinking about showing up and seeing off the people who would defile our monuments. I think it's going to be a great mistake, a great overreach by the Islamists, by the Hamasniks, and their fellow traveller fools. An enormous mistake, an enormous overreach of historic proportions.
Well, one MP, Henry Smith, has urged the government to deploy the military to ensure there is no disruption to Remembrance Day. We will keep a close eye on that story. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that we are seeing an enormous surge in anti-Semitism, but at the same time, we have politicians, activists, and large segments of the media banging on endlessly about Islamophobia. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, we've got Kamala Harris. What do you make of this focus on Islamophobia, Douglas, as Jews in the West feel compelled to hide signs of their Jewishness at a time where they're facing enormous increase in anti-Semitism?
Yes, well, Sadiq Khan, of course, says it for sectional reasons, for identity reasons. It's very revealing during this whole period that despite the enormous plurality, the multiculturalism, the pluralism of political leaders in the UK, it's the Muslim political leaders in the UK who have been most filled with hate against Israel and most willing to talk about making peace and much more. I'm thinking of people like First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, who's married to a Palestinian activist, and of course the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. They can never drop this. They never give a damn about their so-called fellow Muslims being massacred by the hundreds of thousands in Syria, Yemen, or anywhere else. They just get really het up for religious reasons whenever any Muslim is involved in a war with the Jews. And that's for very ancient reasons I'm very sorry we've now imported into politics in the country. But yes, they always come back to Islamophobia first. I don't don't like this word. I think that it's a stupid word. It's always been used to try to intimidate people. It will intimidate people no longer. But yes, it is used as a word to try to intimidate people, to sort of imply that there's some unbelievable bigotry that lies behind dislike of certain things that followers of Islam do. I don't think it is an irrational bigotry. I don't think it is at all. To the extent that such a thing as Islamophobia exists, it is created by the behavior of Muslims. It is created by the behavior of Hamas. Just yesterday, I watched the unvarnished footage of October the 7th, the Hamas massacres. And everybody, all the time, as they're massacring the Jews, just under a month ago, is shouting Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. They are so high on their religious bigotry that they are saying this as they're decapitating young men and much more. Now, I don't want to hear about Islamophobia. To the extent it exists, it's created by people like Hamas because we don't like them and we don't want them. We don't want to be near them. And we expect most Muslims, if they wish to live in our societies, to not want or like those people either. But instead of the rightful ongoing condemnations, people like Sadiq Khan will go bang, bang, just a quick condemnation. You shouldn't cut people's heads off. And then it's on to Islamophobia. We see these people now. We see them in planes. We're being gamed.
Well, absolutely. There are so many useful idiots in the West for the Islamists. Someone who fled a country that went from being relatively modern to an Islamist hellhole. I can completely identify with what you're saying, but of course we do differentiate between peaceful Muslims who are not in any way extremist and those who are marching and chanting for genocide. Now, we are seeing...
Make more voluble. They do have to be much more voluble, because if they're going to say that there has to be a ceasefire in the Middle East, for instance, they have to acknowledge that there was a ceasefire in the Middle East and it was broken by Hamas on the 7th of October. And so, and when moderate Muslims, as we always call them in the West, start shrieking about Israel, I'm sorry that then you have to say, are these people remotely moderate? We have lots of good moderate Muslims for sure, but they need to start speaking up now and speaking up in defense of civilian populations being massacred by Hamas. It's Hamas that broke the ceasefire.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think they're let down by their community leaders. And at these marches, where are the chants against Hamas? Where are the chants to free the Palestinians from this murderous death cult? That would actually, I think, encourage a lot more support for their cause. But it seems to just all the hate and ire is focused on Israel. Now, we talked previously about the left's march through the institutions. It started with universities, and we are seeing some of those devastating results. Let's look at this footage from Harvard of a lone Jewish student, a small man here. You'll see him being bullied and abused by just a hateful mob. Have a look. Douglas, we know one of those in that mob is the editor of the Harvard Law Review. But these vicious bullies are tomorrow's judges, district attorneys and lawmakers.
Well, we must hope not. And a number of law firms in the United States this week actually wrote to Ivy League colleges saying, we're going to be keeping a very close eye on this and have no intention of recruiting people who, apologize for terror or support terror. And it's quite something that, the firms have to write to the universities to remind them of their obligations. I return, by the way, to the previous point. I mean, this is commonplace, this sort of thing. Almost every campus in America, the major ones certainly, are filled with instances like this of Jewish students being harassed, chased down, bullied, intimidated, mocked for the murder of their co-religionists. If this happened to anyone else, we wouldn't tolerate it. If this was a black student, after a murder of black Americans somewhere who was being chased on campus by, I don't know, the same people who killed other people. We would not miss a second in condemning this. We would not miss a second in condemning this. And yet this has become normal on US campuses and across much of the so-called civilized world. It amazes me, Rita, that only the Jews, when the Jews are massacred, are then taunted, are then told that they have to be mindful of those who would kill them. We have to respect the feelings of those who would kill them and who call for their death. And then just lone Jews in places like this are able to be bullied and taunted, and shame cried at them. No, the shame is on Hamas for breaking what ceasefire existed. Shame is on Hamas for beheading small children. Shame is on Hamas for burning families alive. And they dare to do this. They dare to chase down Jews and chant shame at individual Jews. I hope that the identities of all these people come out and the world can make judgments about them.
Douglas Murray, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time this evening. And still to come, Keith Pitt breaks down why a $1 billion energy project was shut down in the federal court today. And later in the program, the very impressive President of Hungary. Welcome back. My next guest penned a colourful piece about the Greens and their destructive force in Australian politics. Former Resources Minister Keith Pitt wrote in the Courier Mail that the Labor-held inner city seats are currently under attack by the Greens. There already exists a coalition of sorts between the parties of the socialist left. But will that association be formalised further, as has been suggested by some senior Greens MPs? National MP for Hinkler, Keith Pitt, joins me now. Keith, welcome to the program. Will we see a formal coalition between Labor and the Greens?
Rita, it already exists, right? It's already there. So
it's not formal. It's there. Labor could not be in government without preferences from the Greens. That's for sure. But will we see something like the Liberal Nationals have? That sort of a coalition where you might see a Greens MP sitting in cabinet.
Oh, you're suggesting Glaber or Labourine?
Labourine, I like that.
Well, this is the point I was making in the op-ed. So you've got effectively, the mild, meek, Dr. Banner types, but in reality, they're the improbable Hulk, right? They want to close everything. You imagine Adam Band as the Resources Minister.
Oh, that would be scary.
Sarah Hanson-Young looking after water and agriculture.
Well, she sometimes confuses TV shows with real life, so that's not ideal.
Not a good start.
For that role. And we are seeing the Greens make decisions that seem very much hypocritical. You pointed out that they back clearing of thousands of hectares of koala habitat to put these solar farms and wind projects. I mean, how do they sell that to their voters? And let's not beat around the bush. They've got a lot of supporters, and the younger Australians are increasingly voting Greens. How do they convince them that it's a good idea to be clearing koala habitat? How is that a green project?
Well, they just don't tell them. They lie. They told them at the last election they would get rid of their HEX debt. Well, that hasn't happened. It's not happening. And now we see these types of projects, and press today, we see proposals where they're going to change potentially the EPBC Act to give these types of projects effectively the green light. Now, everything else, coal, oil, gas, cattle, anything in agriculture, clearing for building houses, can't do that. But if it's wind and solar, big thumbs up, knock it all down. It is such a mess.
It is an absolute mess, and we know where that infrastructure largely comes from. It's from China, so we're enriching China. We're becoming dependent on that supply chain that China controls, and they're a blight on the landscape. When you fly over the country and you see these solar farms, hideous. And then in beautiful, otherwise country, it scars the country. Yeah, it's certainly something that I think Australians are increasingly becoming aware of. Now, yesterday we saw Treasurer Jim Chalmers warn Australia that we will not be able to meet our net zero emission targets by 2050 without greater, robust government intervention, and we all know what that's code for, more taxpayer dollars. But he claims spending this money will actually bring down inflation because it will ultimately lead to cheaper energy costs. What do you think about that?
So you're going to spend potentially more than $1 trillion of the taxpayers' money, and that will bring inflation down. But Jimbonomics at its best. I don't think I've seen it any better than that. But I mean, every single one of your viewers, Rita, how many of them had their power prices go down, their gas prices go down? This will turbocharge those challenges. It will make it worse. They will pay more. Cost of living is out of control now. And I think the Australian people need to tell federal Labor, no more. Stop trying to bring this stuff forward even faster. They just can't pay for it.
I love Jimbonomics. I mean, it sounds even better than Bidenomics. I think that could catch on, like Airbus Albo, which our good friend Paul Murray coined. What about coal prices? I mean, if we're not closing down all our coal plants, energy costs will probably right now be rock bottom because coal prices have dived.
Well, thermal coal prices certainly come off. But under an Adam Bandt Cabinet Ministry for Resources, there'll be no new projects and they'll close all the ones that exist. I mean, as the former Resources Minister...
But will we still export our coal so other countries can have the benefit of cheap, reliable energy?
Well, that's the exact question. And as the former Resources Minister, my rules are easy. If they're buying, we're selling. Because it's good for the country, it's good for the economy, it's good for jobs. And why wouldn't we utilise our own resources? And how is it that under Labor's proposal, the safeguard mechanism, you can have offsets if you're an aluminium smelter, you deliver cement, concrete, whether you do steel, iron ore, or anything else, but you can't offset a coal-fired power station which is reliable, that can deliver really cheap electricity. They all have to close.
It's beyond me. And how many are China opening every week? I mean, that is the contrast. It's not like we're in line with the rest of the world. We saw the federal court rule recently that energy giant Santos cannot install undersea pipelines for its $5.3 billion Barossa project as planned because lawyers for a Tiwi Islander elder argued it would cause irreparable harm to traditional owners' connection to sea and country. A full hearing will be heard on November 13 to determine whether drilling can ever begin on the 262-kilometre long pipeline. Just another project that seems to be the target of lawfare. This, again, doesn't seem to be a sustainable way of going about energy security or energy policy.
Don't forget, federal Labor fund those lawyers.
So your
taxpayer dollars
go to fund
the Environmental Defender's Office,
who then interrupt or stop these projects.
Yep, and same at Woodside for the big project of Western Australia. This one north of the Territory, out in the ocean, a couple hundred K. Not only will you potentially lose that project, but you potentially lose the Darwin LNG upgrade, 20-year life extension, 600 jobs, same in Western Australia. These projects take years to develop, to deliver, to get a financial decision for the engineering, the material. I mean, Santos, if I remember correctly, they've spent $2 or $3 billion of their $5 already, and they're parked up because of an activist lawyer group funded by the taxpayer under decisions from the Labor Treasurer.
And normally, when there's legal action, the litigants have something to lose. But in this case, the taxpayer is picking up the bill. So if they take this action and they're ultimately unsuccessful, if they have costs awarded against them, the actual activists aren't out of pocket, are they? We are out of pocket.
No. So the federal Labor budget gave them almost $10 million, which has been allocated, and then more than $2 million every year ongoing.
Wow.
So on one side, they're saying, yes, we love resources and we think they're great. But on the other side, they're funding the people who are closing the projects that are delivering jobs and driving our economy. So this is the hypocrisy of the federal Labor government. It is mad. It's just not that hard. How about we do the things that work, we utilise our own resources, we get power prices down and let every Australian have an opportunity that they deserve.
Well, I spoke about this issue yesterday on this station, and I advocated very strongly for the coalition to abandon its net zero position, give the electorate a clear choice at the ballot box at the next federal election. Keith Pitt, I trust you will advocate for that position, and thank you for joining me today.
Well, certainly the one I advocated last time, and I think that discussion is coming fast.
Good to hear, good to hear. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with a lefty losing it who's also a very good ad for homeschooling.
I am who I say I am, and you are who you say you are, and sometimes we are wrong about who we think other people are. That's okay. Don't assume. You can always just ask, which pronouns do you use? He, him, she, her, they, them, these, er. Let me know which one do you prefer?
Oh dear, I think we're about to see a lot more confused kids with her as their pronoun-obsessed teacher. Now don't go anywhere, I'm going to have more Lefties Losing It for you later in the program. But coming up next, Madam President of Hungary, Katalin Novak, joins me to discuss whether Hungary deserves all the left-leaning criticism it receives. That's after this. Welcome back. Now to a brilliant woman who became Hungary's youngest president and its first female president. Hungary stands alone in many respects in the EU. It has an uncompromising border protection policy. It is unashamedly Christian, and there are bold policies in place to encourage women to have children, and lots of them. I spoke to the president of Hungary, Katalin Novak, earlier today. Joining me now is President of Hungary, Katalin Novak. Madam President, welcome to Australia. Right now we are seeing great upheaval in the world. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, Israel's counter-offensive against Hamas terrorists, and throughout Europe that has inspired racial and religious unrest. We've seen mass protests in London, Paris and elsewhere. How is Hungary handling these issues?
We live right now in an unstable world. Hungary is very far away from Australia, 15,000 kilometers. We are in the middle, in the heart of Europe, direct neighbors to the war-hit Ukraine, also having a Hungarian ethnic minority on the territory of Ukraine, so we are really directly affected by the war in Ukraine, and that is very worrisome. We would like to do our utmost in order to reach a peace as soon as possible, so we are interested in negotiations, peace talks, and then peace the soon as possible. And of course we are very worried for the situation in Israel, and we are very supportive for Israel, me personally also.
Your country shares a border with Ukraine. How is the war with Russia progressing, and do you see an end to the conflict in sight?
Unfortunately, not for now. The war is a tragedy on a daily basis. On both sides they are losing lives, and the Ukrainians are also losing a lot of lives every single day. So unfortunately the war is going very slowly and doesn't seem to end in the near future. We condemn the invasion of Ukraine, and we condemn the aggression of Russia, and we provide humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. That means that since the outbreak of the war, 2 million people crossed the Hungarian borders due to this war conflict, and most of them didn't stay in Hungary, but we do provide humanitarian aid to them. So the problem is right now that we don't see how we will proceed to peace negotiations and a peace at the end of the day, which would be the ultimate purpose of all of us.
Now, despite providing enormous aid, humanitarian aid to Ukrainians fleeing, Hungary has still attracted a great deal of criticism from left-leaning politicians and media for its immigration policy. The EU's top court has reprimanded Hungary over its migration policy, specifically the outsourcing of asylum applications. Can you tell me what the philosophy is behind your country's tough border protection policies?
We are speaking in Australia, where you introduced the Stop the Boats policy, which proved to be very successful. In Hungary, we don't have any sea entrance. We are a landlocked country surrounded by 7 neighbors, but we have a very strong pressure from our southern borders. We are protecting actually the external borders of the European Union, of the Schengen zone. So that means that Hungary is not only protecting its own borders, but also that of the European Union. And for that reason, we have to somehow stand against this big pressure from our southern borders through the Balkan route for the immigrants. So that's one thing, that we have to protect our borders. I think a country is as strong as it can support its land, its borders. It is a must for each and every country to be able to decide on who to let in and who not to. So that is decisive for each and every country, so as for Hungary. And also there is another aspect. We have quite challenging demographic situation, as most of the welfare countries or the well-developed Western type of countries. And we don't want to tackle this demographic issue by putting the emphasis on immigration. We'd rather emphasize the importance of childbearing and family support. So we would like to enable Hungarian couples to have as many children as they want to in the moment when they want to have them, without any financial disadvantages.
Well, your country's pro-family policies are just astonishing, fascinating, so different to what we have here. Women who have 4 children or more will not pay any income tax for life. Explain the policy to me and the impact it's had.
For us, family is a core value. Our society is based on strong families, and we see how many financial burdens young couples face when it's about housing, when it's about parenting, when it's about having more children. So we would like to just somehow decrease these financial disadvantages and really enable childbearing in Hungary. So for that reason, they have a pro-family tax policy. Or the more children you have, the less personal income tax you pay in Hungary. And once you have at least 4 children as a mother, then you don't pay any personal income tax ever in your life. But for example, if you go to university and you have a student loan, then later on when you will have children as a mother, then we will decrease or totally write off your student loan depending on the number of children you have. Or for example, we have grandparental leave in Hungary. That means that the grandparents who are still active can stay at home with the grandchildren when both parents are active and don't have the chance to do so. So what we would like to do is to create a really free environment for families and for childbearing. Not any single family is the same as the other one. So in each and every family, you have to find your own solutions. There are also single-parented families. We also support them because they have double burdens. So we would like them also to thrive. Once a child is born, no matter where in the world, once it's about a Hungarian child, we try to reach out to the family and support the family life. We spend, or I would rather use the word or the expression, we invest more than 6% of our GDP for family support, which is the highest percentage worldwide. And we also see some consequences because the number of marriages in Hungary doubled in 10 years. The fertility rate rose by 25%. It's the highest increase. And if I, for example, compare it to Australia, where we saw a huge increase in the early years of the 2000, so after 2000, 2002 and 2006, if I remember well, then you had an increase in your fertility rate and you also reached above 2. But then it started to drop, and it's in Australia is also very worrisome, just as in all of our countries.
Wow, it's just fascinating. What do you think we can learn from Hungary? You've spent a few days now in Australia. Is that an area where we could learn from Hungary, the pro-family policies?
We could learn from each other. I think we can also learn from Australia, the way you are so positively reactive to what is happening around you, and so calm and so peaceful, and I think it is for me also a great experience to see how nice and friendly Australian people are, not only with us, with me personally of course, but with the almost 100,000 Hungarians who live here in Australia. And I would also like to thank all Australians for the hospitality and welcoming, how they receive these 100,000 Hungarians who had to leave their countries for different reasons in the last 200 years, and I think that is also something that we can learn from you. What we can maybe show as an example, this family orientation, that we would like to have not only good family policy schemes financially, but also a family-friendly environment in Hungary, a family-friendly mindset. And that means that each and every person and each and every couple should be able to take his or their own decisions about childbearing, if to have children, when to have children, how many children to have. But having children should necessarily mean no disadvantage for anybody. That is something that we put in the hardcore of our policies, and that is, I think, something that maybe our countries could also work for.
Now, finally, we're likely to see another Biden v. Trump race for the US president in 2024. How do you see that race? Seemed like President Donald Trump had a soft spot for Hungary during his 4 years.
For us, Hungary, it is very important that nobody intervenes in our internal policies. We are a sovereign country, we are a sovereign nation, we are sovereign people, and we are very proud of our 1,000-year-old history and our sovereignty as well. So for us, the US foreign policy is good if it's not about intervening in anybody other's life or any other country's life. So for us, the US foreign policy, which we stand for, is that they, let's say, leave us alone from that perspective, and that was characteristic to some presidents, and that is not characteristic from some others. I don't want to go into any more details, but I think exporting democracy the way that sometimes the US tries to do is not the best solution.
Madam President, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your interest.
Still to come, a bizarre Christmas ad that sums up everything that is currently wrong with the West. That's coming up next. Welcome back. You would have heard of Go Woke, Go Broke. Well, I'm not sure if this next ad fits neatly into that category. It's not so much woke as tone deaf, dumb and irritating, and the backlash to this Marks and Spencer ad has been fierce.
Anything for love, but I won't do that. No, I won't do that. I would do anything for love, anything you've been dreaming of, but I just won't do that. No, I just won't do that.
This Christmas, do only what you love.
Yes, that's a great message there. Be selfish in the festive season, ignore the Christmas spirit and think only of yourself. No wonder there was a massive backlash to that ad, and the company has since apologised. Well, that's it from me. I'll see you Sunday morning for Outsiders. Up next is James Morrow with the US Report.